let's put it plainly: is HR evolving fast enough? And if not, what needs to change? So I'm going to introduce you to the guest. It sounded like Gabor might have another noise with him at their moment. So I'll introduce him last, perhaps. So Adam, you already know, strategic workforce planning leader at EY, and author of Agile Workforce Planning. Gabor, why don't you? I'm sorry, Marlo, why don't you introduce yourselves first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Trevor, and great sharing, Adam. Lots of learnings out of that discussion. So, yeah, hi everyone. I'm Marlo. I'm actually responsible for HR transformation at Johnson Controls. We are in the buildings technology space, so we provide lots of different technologies and solutions for buildings around the globe. We've got about 100,000 employees worldwide. We're about a $23 billion company, so operate in every part of the world. We're in some of the most iconic global buildings, and we are ourselves very much into transformation. Really trying to leverage, obviously, digitization, leverage the insides of buildings to make them cleaner, healthier, and ultimately smarter. So yeah, and I've got that role across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. So happy to be on the panel. Thanks, Trevor.
It's great to have you with us, Marlo. Gabor, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, so congratulations for the conference. It's going so well so far. So I'm pleased to be here, and I'm shortly introduce myself. I'm working for BP. Within BP, I'm working for Castro, and I'm responsible for supporting enabling functions, which including our 20 plants around the globe, which producing lubricants in the blending plants, as well as the marketing function. I'm working together with 38 countries, so it's very, very diverse and very dynamic environment. So I'm happy to be in the panel too.
Okay, we're absolutely delighted to have you with us. So just to recap, it's all about HR transformation and operating models. And we said that, many organizations are exploring new ways to structure the HR function, to be agile, strategically aligned, and so on. And I suppose one of the first topics that comes to mind is this sort of issue around pace and agility. These are all words that we kind of throw around like confetti sometimes, but let's just get down to the sort of more direct issues. And let's and feel free, panel, to build on each other's comments and disagree if you want to. But perhaps Marlo first. Let's put it plainly: is HR evolving fast enough? And if not, what needs to change?
Yeah, so it almost sounds like a bit of a trick question, right? Are we evolving fast enough?
It wasn't meant to be.
Of course we are, right? We want to pat ourselves on the back. Well, maybe not everywhere, right? But I think, briefly put into context, right? I think we as a function have evolved quite rapidly, right? If we think probably not long ago, we were mainly about compliance, right? We were capturing employee time, we were running payroll and resolving employee relationship issues. I think now we have a much stronger seat at the table alongside CFOs and really steering the business. Now, nonetheless, like I said, the velocity of business really is intense. Where do I see the most need for speed and agility right now? Talking from our business perspective, it's probably three areas. It's digitization. Clearly, it's flexibility that employees are seeking. And it's also in the area of skills or capability building, right? Do we have the right skills on board to build tomorrow's business, right? So maybe let me pick one, the obvious one, and then maybe a more surprising one to just provide a couple of examples and a bit of reflection. I think we've all seen a hyper accelerated move towards digital. It's clearly had a lot of ramifications on every aspect of work, right? The what, the how, the who, and also the when. Digitized work can be broken down, it can be distributed. Certainly in a global setup like ours at Johnson Controls, we can do more work asynchronously. So really leveraging time zones, leveraging specific skills in certain parts of the organization. We post activity, and then workers, whether it's internal to our organization or external partners or freelancers, can pick up on that work and provide input based on their role, based on their expertise, based on their desire for development. So I think those are great opportunities that I think can really help accelerate our agility. But it also means working in dispersed teams is significantly increasing, and even the definition of what is a team is changing over time. It's becoming a lot more elastic because it really extends beyond the boundaries of even our own organization. So I think that's one area, and I think one of the litmus tests around digitization in HR is always do we actually, and do you guys have an HR digital officer on your teams? Do you have someone who's thinking ahead and who's living and breathing this every day and incorporates ideas that might not be seen in other organizations, but really meets your own business needs? Someone who really thinks user experience first and foremost to support employees in the efficient adoption of new tools and ways of working. So I think that to me is one area. I think the other one that I just briefly touch on might be slightly less obvious, but I think we all have an accountability in shaping the role of our organization in society. I think to me, companies can really no longer keep themselves out of the grand societal challenges, whether it's climate change, whether it's social justice or other large aspects. I think that's really also a tremendous opportunity for us to show our values in practice and to become more agile. If you think about it, we may sometimes have to quickly fill in where also governments are not as fast in making decisions or reacting quickly enough. So take the start of the pandemic. Right? Many of us reacted quite quickly. We almost overnight shifted, in some cases, tens of thousands of employees to working from home to protect our employees' health and also maintain the ability to fulfill our customers' needs. So I think this quick decision making is more and more expected from all of our stakeholders, and I think it also enables HR to lead from the front and align quickly with the business, and always have a good sense of ethics, right? Aiming to do really what's right. So, a couple of thoughts from my side. I don't know, Gabor or Adam, anything to build on?
So, if I may jump in, I would share my personal opinion because I'm sharing your view on the speed and agility to move towards and do the right thing for the company, and I love, as much as I love benchmarking, I need to also time to time get to the conclusion that every organization is in a different level and different evolutionary level, and one fits not all. and therefore, for instance, when some companies, especially in the consulting, agility is the right way of doing things and reorganizing the activities around the HR. Maybe for global organizations, not all the functions can work in an agile way, and we should do test and sometimes fail with these trials. Just personal thoughts on the speed of changes we doing things in HR. I think sometimes we're doing too much. Sometimes even the organization are not finished one major transformation and we are turning into another one, which creates a lot of unnecessary pressure on people and leaders because they still living in the old world. They're not adjusting and not digesting the new ways of working. So maybe we are overstretching sometimes organizations. So we have to be conscious what is the healthy way of stretching the goals around this.
Is there then a danger let's talk about organizations generally then of this agility fatigue, if you like, that people go, oh God, not another transformation initiative. We've had so many of those.
I think it is. I'm working since late 90s, and I've seen as you all have seen, many organizational changes, new initiatives, Six Sigma, Lean, Agility, and so on and so forth. And people can get to the point where they would say that I would like to complete at least a year with the same ways of working and finding out what is working, what needs to be changed. So change fatigue situation is something we really need to take a look and focus on to avoid.
Okay, and Adam, you've had a. Sorry, I should say, by the way, if we've got questions out there, then please, we'd love to hear them. So don't be shy. In a virtual environment, it's easier to type these things in, I'm sure, and then be the first one to stick up your hand. So let's go for it. Adam, you've had a chance to get your breath back after your excellent presentation. I mean, this kind of starts to play on some of the things that you were talking about. When
it has. I mean, and I absolutely agree with with the points that have been raised. But I always reflect. Look, change is constant, and I know that change is constant because I've got young kids, and and every week they surprise me with something new because they are constantly changing and growing. As we constantly change and grow, as the organisations we're in constantly change and grow, as society constantly changes and grows. So we're always going to have to be changing ourselves in order to adapt to that and try and be the best that they can be. So it's all about, to what extent do we make that change easy? And what I see often is, well, the same people who need to deliver business as usual, you all need to work harder in order to deliver transformation. And that's why there's change fatigue, because things aren't people aren't fully considering what is it that we need to do in order to be successful in the transformation. They just go, everyone transform. And so when these things are properly planned, properly resourced, properly supported, actually you can start to make this work. But you need a workforce who are going to be able to do that and support it. You can't simply throw it as an additionality on everyone when they've already got a full workload. But I think we are going to have to accept in organizations that change is inevitable. And perhaps the advice that we can give, because there are organizations that we see that are doing this. And perhaps, what from my observations, the organizations, and particularly when HR changes, the organizations that particularly struggle are perhaps those who aren't comfortable with risk. It's those organizations who aren't quite comfortable moving at speed to say, well, in that case, here's what we won't do. We won't do this, and we won't do this, and we won't do this. And we're prepared collectively to accept the risk of that. It needs to be accountable at a senior level. You can't just go to one of your more junior staff and have them be accountable for risks. And once we start doing that, that is a way that organizations who are the more agile are able to make those decisions quite quickly and manage risks and be comfortable with it, and allow them to have the agility to skip from one to the other.
Okay, we've had a great question and good practical stuff from Abir Khalil, who says, what is the first step to take on agile HR? So if you're all kind of in your organizations sort of violently agreeing that you've got to be more agile, what do you do then? What's the very first thing you do in order to set yourself on the path to agility? Does anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, happy to start. I think it's a great question. I think as always in the human mind, it's why, right? I think you have to be pretty clear on the why, and I think take Adam's comments into consideration. Yes, we need to be able to scope it out and think about what's the outcome that we're aiming to achieve. First of all, for ourselves, right? And with ourselves, I don't mean our HR function. I mean our employees and our customers, right? So I think being clear about what we're aiming to achieve. I think also taking Adam's cue, right? I mean, being honest about that we don't know all the answers, but I think being able to articulate why we're aiming to do something different, and giving people that belief that yes, senior leaders are behind it, but then also how do you get people managers have such an important role to play in any organization. How do you get a lot of people managers behind you, because they're ultimately the key to success. To be able to articulate this clearly, succinctly throughout the organization. I think those are really important aspects. So, that's clearly where I would start, is, really thinking deeply about, why you aim to do that. And then also, of course, where it's kind of your first use case, right? I mean, because I think if you've got a first use case and you get, as a receptive part of the organization and a successful use case under your belt, then word of mouth travels that, the new ways of doing things, or the slightly different ways of doing things, are actually successful. They're yielding this type of outcome, right, and this type of benefit.
Okay, that's a brilliant answer, Marlo. Gabor, you sort of instinctively shot up your hand there as you wanted to say something when I asked that question.
Yeah, but Marlo summed it up so well. I just would like to stress on the point that the scope and the scale should be well defined. What should be the first one? Because as anything, when you're starting with a project in an agile way, everything is in the spotlight. So you have to have the right stakeholders involved, right people watching the outcomes of every sprint, what you're doing. So define well the first project. It can be very key in the success.
Okay. Adam, you might want to take this question, I mean, unless you've got something to say on to build on the others. There's another question sort of come in, which kind of, I think, is moving towards another topic I wanted to discuss, from Elisa Morelli, this question, which is, what would be key success factors to move towards agile work environments? Sort of, how do you know it's working, basically?
You know it's working because you've done that as part of your thinking of the why. It's going to be different. It's going to be a very different in different organizations and the way things operate. And it comes down to if once you've defined your why, what is it why are we going to change? What's the reason for it to change? Because it will allow us to do X. Well, then the success factor is that it allows you to do X. That's and getting that quite clearly in terms of why do we need to do this? Why does this matter? Is the key. It is absolutely key into connecting. It's exactly as Marlo says, and I absolutely agree with the start with why, and perhaps the thing I would add as part of that is first step to take on making changes, agreeing that you're going to change.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else got anything to add on Elisa's specific question about success factors?
Yeah, maybe again, like the question, it's also kind of mood across the organization, sentiment, and I think it's quite practically also level of engagement across the organization. And with that, I don't mean a typical engagement measure, but really, how many people want to get involved? I would see HR not as a standalone distinct function. I think we become a lot more multidisciplinary, and I think we may even talk about that a little bit when we talk about data and other aspects, right? So one of the measures is also, right, if you call out an initiative and you're trying to staff something and then you're trying to scale up and expand, how many people from outside of your own network and your own function are actually proactively raising their hand and saying, I want to get involved, right? How many business leads are raising their hands to say, please come and support me with your new approach, with your new ways of working, because it can benefit my business. So I think we all have to consider it. We're all part of the same organization, right? And I think the more that you hear from outside of the function, out of areas that you probably wouldn't expect at first, right? That is also a litmus test. That's a real good measure of success, because that means that word of mouth is traveling and that we are impactful, right? Because ultimately that's what it's all about, right? I mean, are we able to achieve our outcome in a more effective, smarter, better way? So I think again, people willing to help resources and to expand their own horizons and contribute. That's a real good measure as well.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. That's really good. You've both reminded me of the issue around. By the way, I see Dora Tompus has asked a question. Dora, I will come to your question. It fits in with something that I think we'll be coming to in just a second. So bear with us on that one. What you've both been talking about, though, Marlo and Adam, it sort of makes me move on in terms of success factors, talking about numbers. And and Adam, you had a lot of numbers in your presentation, which was fantastic. I love that sort of thing, that sort of quantification. there's a bit of it's a lot of numbers around, though, sort of around HR all of a sudden, and how do we make sure that we're not kind of drowning in data, and that we know what data to use? I'll start with you, Adam, and then I'll come on to you, Gabor, on that one. So let's move on to numbers a little bit, and then we'll move back on to Dora's question.
Yeah, so this is a really crucial bit, and I think it's something that for some people for some HR functions, they haven't got this. Organizations run on numbers. Let's be really clear about that. Organizations run on numbers. Organizations don't run for free. So there's financial numbers in there. Everything that's happening is numbers. So unless we recognize that all of this is about a numbers game, then you're ultimately going to struggle. So yes, there are going to be, those numbers will translate into qualitative outcomes. So it's not just purely saying numbers, grr. They will all translate, but we need to recognize that numbers are a key component, and that has to be recognized throughout HR. So if we're starting with back to Marlo's earlier point, with everything, we start with the why, and for HR, we've got to be starting with the business why. And if we're doing that and we can start to translate those numbers, what are the business numbers and how do they translate through to what it is that HR does? That's going to make you infinitely successful in the kinds of things you do. I will always remember what. Now, this was something when we did HR Congress back in Nice. Dave Ulrich had said to a room of us, if as an HR practitioner you're not comfortable with numbers, then the best place you can get comfortable with numbers is talking to finance. Go and find someone in finance and invite them to lunch. They don't have friends, they will agree. And that's how you get good.
Just to jump in there, I almost take offense to that. I started my career in finance, then I moved to HR. No, but great analogy, Adam.
That was okay. So I'd just like to issue an apologies for any finance people listening to this broadcast. However, we get the point, Adam. I think that's a point well made. Gabor, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the very important stages being passed in many companies by using the BI. So BI is a good tool to start to make transparent what the data is telling you. I don't think that we are at the stage of using it instinctively and using it frequently to make a business-driven and data-driven decisions. But I think the first step is to have the transparent data. And then I would also invite for lunch the data scientists of the company to have a conversation about how we can work together more and more frequently, because I keep saying to my colleagues that we are sitting on a data which is a treasure for having trajectories where the organization is going, and we are not using it well so far. So the first important thing, make it transparent. We've done it. How to create insight and data-driven decisions, that's the next stage, and that's we are heading to.
Okay, great. I want to, were you about to say something, Marlo?
Well, I was going to say, maybe if I can build on both Adam's and Gabor's point, I mean, I would maybe even go one step further than just a lunch. I would seek a space for a data analytics individual, an expert on the HR team. Right, and I think again, this goes a little bit back to what I was talking about earlier. I think it becomes more multidisciplinary HR, right? I mean, whether that's out of the finance space, whether that's out of the analytical marketing. I mean, there's lots of areas where we could tap into for that expertise. Most of the times we don't have it in HR, but I think there really is a space for someone like that, or maybe even a small COE on the HR team over time, because again, we're all moving down the paths of digitizing more and getting a lot more data insights, whether that's on, in areas of employee experience, whether that's in the area of, matching heads with cost, etc. Right? I mean, no matter which area we look. So I think, that is one of the takeaways that I would suggest is, how much of data analytics expertise do we have on the HR team, and how do we best source that? And also that is a good test. If somebody in data analytics does not want to join the HR team, that also gives you some insights into the positioning and the current status of perception of HR.
Okay, right. That's an interesting point in terms of perceptions in the organization. Let's move on to Dora's question, because it builds very nicely into the sort of issue around sort of the service delivery model, and sort of capabilities really. And she asked the question, thank you for this question, Dora, how should HR sense if the speed and volume of change is in line with the capability to change on the business side? I mean, so this kind of gets, I think it's a brilliant question, is, if you're, if there's a certain value of change, what if it's running ahead of the actual capability of the business? I mean, how can HR gauge that sort of balance? I mean, Gabor, perhaps you could kick us off on that one.
Yeah, it's very crucial, and I think maybe a couple of things what we can do here. If you're running pilot activities to testing the capability of the organization, it's always a good step, because then if you finding a good guinea pig part of the organization which is representing well the rest of the organization, then you may have the answers without risking to implementing something which is not feasible yet at your organization. And I would say it will be boring to hear, Dora, but I think the good old engagement and past data, if you're phrasing the question well, and if you do it more frequently than 1 year, that's also helping out to sense where the organization is going to and what their opinion is, what they are struggling with. And the good old-fashioned townhouse. Yeah. It's also still working, and it's a treasure of information what we can use. So participate and checking the questions people are putting there. It's give you an intention that where they are heading to. So that's my 2 cents in the.
Okay, this is all about building change that lasts, really. About creating something. Yeah. Robust. I mean, I guess I think, Dora, that what you're sort of getting at is this sort of worry around a lack of equilibrium between sort of capabilities and demand, supply and demand of change. Adam, you're nodding your head vigorously.
Yeah, I mean, there's a presumption in this, which is there a business need for the change? So if there is a business need for HR to change, or if there's a business need for everyone to change, and then as part of a planning process, you're recognizing that, well, that means that the speed that HR could move and needs to move in order for the timelines of this change is out of kilter with the speed at which the businesses move. Well, then that then informs the planning process of, well, part of this is then to support the change, to do the change, to support change management within the business. Again, HR doesn't necessarily need to own this, but it at least needs to be the trigger for it. And to be able to support and enable that capability build in the business so that you do get everyone back in equilibrium. So it is a key aspect as part of the planning process to recognize that, so that all elements are covered. So you're not in a position where HR are running ahead and being unhelpfully disruptive to a business that is going to impact service delivery.
Okay, great. Go on, Marlo.
Yeah, maybe just one thing I would add is it's just the distinction between capability and mindset. I think that's another kind of healthy one to look at in terms of your question, Dora, and also in general, right? Is it more the capability, the skills, which can be addressed through training and upskilling and more technical means, or is it more the mindset? So I think understanding what you need to go after, and then using some of the techniques that Adam and Gabor laid out, I think is also critical. So.
Brilliant. I mean, we're getting near towards the end of our time now, so we'll probably wrap up in about sort of 5 minutes or so. But I've got I suppose, a roundup question that, I know a lot of people, we're having a lot of information sort of thrown at us in this conference and in this session. And if there was one important point about HR transformation that you'd like the audience, who have asked some excellent questions, to take away from this discussion, what would it be, do you think? I mean, Marlo, let's stick with you first. I mean, is there something in particular you'd say, if you don't remember anything else, remember this about HR transformation?
That's a good question. I'd say be more outcome driven. So, I think a lot of us, we still get kind of bogged down in, process, technologies, etc. I would always think about, how do we add value? And ultimately, how do we help, as I said earlier, how do we help steer that business overall, right? I mean, the business is clearly steered by the financials because that's still how we are being measured, whether we're quoted or non-quoted companies. But it also is very much about how we do things. And I think that how and the why we talked about, becoming a lot more critical. So I think I would really focus in on, what outcome are you aiming to achieve, and then making sure that there's broad scale alignment with the business leaders, because ultimately, right, in most cases, right, I mean, the HR function is a fraction compared to the size of the business. So, and all our colleagues in the business, right, I mean, they'll look up to their respective business leaders, right? So those need to be on board. Those need to be able to sponsor, to clearly articulate, and also to simplify the messaging, right? So again, for me, it's really focused on around outcomes.
Okay, brilliant. Gabor?
It's brilliant what Marlo said. I would like to only just continue to saying that outcome driven, which is highly connected with business measures. Once we are achieving that, there will be no blockers on the road. We will have much more support for the business, and make it clear what's in it for every function who is contributing to the success. It's also important, and we have a tendency to forget that we know why we are doing it. It's going to be good for you, but we are not telling what is the benefit of the organization and the function supporting the change itself. So we have to have more time to involving others and creating a common success, because that's the way it's sustainable to manage the change.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Gabor. And finally, Adam, what's your take?
In the risk of sounding like a broken record, it is absolutely, if you're going to take anything away, it's absolutely anything that you do in terms of transformation needs to be connected to tangible business outcomes. There are HR outcomes, but this is about a tangible business outcome. If we take the example that I sort of gave from my presentations around burnout, then you go, well, what's the outcome that we want to achieve? We're going to reduce burnout. And what are the things that are going to tangibly reduce burnout? And that's the difference between, well, shall we create an HR initiative that is about changing the capability and capacity in our organization to deal with this, or going, well, should we just introduce yoga classes? Because yoga classes aren't really going to cut it in the current day. So it's working out what is it that is really tied to the business outcomes we're going to achieve and will make a tangible difference.
Okay, that's brilliant, and I think you guys have all made a tangible difference today, because we've had lots of favourable comments, among them Sevilla Caravanu, who says simply great session, and I would concur with that you guys have really added huge amounts of value. I mean, so we're going to start to wrap up now. But first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Marlo, Gabor and Adam. This is a point at which a physical conference, I'd say, show your appreciation in the usual way, but I can guarantee that there are people clapping their hands sort of in the streets of, and the HR departments of the world as we speak, in response to what you've done today. So thank you very much for your contribution to this session on HR transformation. Thank you earlier to Max, who was talking about sort of time, about making the most of your time, and gave a very sort of detailed and a very valuable presentation on how and where we spend our time, and the extra hours that can be generated from doing that. And of course, Adam, who prior to the panel was talking brilliantly around the sort of sustainability in business based on his work, with a great in-depth presentation. More comments. Great panel. Thank you all. Thank you. I can't keep up with them now. Thank you for the great insights. Thank you. People are saying so. People are very appreciative of what's been happening. All that remains to say is, thank you for attending this session of HR transformation with the help and support of our friends at Personio, and that we will see you all back at 1 p.m. Central European time. That's 12 noon in the UK, with the leadership and culture tracks. But until then, I think we can safely say thank you to everyone, and go and enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you back on the other side.